The conflict with Israel and Hezbollah continues as there are concerns over ceasefire negotiations. You can see airstrikes still underway at this hour. And my goodness, just look at the devastation. You can see the buildings that have been impacted. Lebanese people in that area displaced. We are also following breaking news headlines as it relates to the conflict with Israel and Hamas. Israel Defense Forces are putting this out on X early this Monday, saying, quote, Omer Nutra, a 21-year-old American Israeli, served as a platoon commander in the Armored Corps. Today, we can confirm, based on intelligence, that he was killed in battle on October 7th, and his body has been held hostage in Gaza since. They go on to say, may his memory be a blessing. A lot to dissect on this Monday as it relates to Middle East conflict. So we want to bring into the conversation the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, Dr. Asaf Romirowsky. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday, Dr. Asaf.
Good morning. Thank you for having me as always.
So I want to first dissect the very latest. Israel Defense Forces putting that statement out on X, further showing how Hamas is keeping these bodies of those captives. We know that we've seen on the weekends those pressers and those rallies out in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, Israel, where families are saying, even if you don't return our loved ones to us alive, we at least want their bodies so we can have proper burial. Could you provide this context for us, please?
Sure. So let's frame it. So the Natura family, first of all, it's important to know that Omar Natura was another Israeli American, another American who sadly lost his life. It was believed up until the news was released now that he was still in captivity. You might remember that during the conventions, the Natura family, who is from New York, has been going on and fighting for their son's life and advocating for his release. And so that's, he's another kid who was another symbol and now the unfortunate victim of the reality. Over the years, historically, it is proven, and this is still the case and has been the case, Hamas is still holding bodies from 2014, that Israel will indeed release and negotiate for dead bodies because of the sanctity within Judaism of bringing back individuals to a proper Jewish burial. And so Hamas knows that, and Hamas takes advantage of that. And so, and this is exactly the point, even after individuals were killed during the horrific slaughtering on 10/7, the bodies were taken and kidnapped back to Gaza to negotiate and use them as bargaining chips. And that's exactly what we saw, unfortunately, what we know now has happened with Natura. He was a tank commander on the Gaza border, and what happened, apparently, the tank was attacked and his body was taken into Gaza. It's only now, as a result of what comes off as forensic evidence, that we know that actually he was killed on 10/7, but up until now, the family believed that he was still alive. And again, we're fighting for the release like they've been fighting all along, for all the hostages to come home. And this is exactly where the psychological warfare has been playing out, where Hamas knows exactly how to push all the buttons. It's also important to note that last week, yet another video of a hostage was released. So this is all part of the psychological warfare, looking to put pressure on Israeli society and create fragmentation within Israeli society as it's fighting this ongoing war against Hamas. And so that's all part of the ingredients out of the makeup of what we've been seeing here happening for the past year plus now.
Yeah, and Dr. Asaf, to further add to that fear-mongering that you're mentioning that Hamas is doing in real time, what does that mean as far as ceasefire negotiations that were happening out in Egypt? I mean, if they are continuing to do this, does it further show that they are so far removed from any type of ceasefire that they say they want?
Well, again, these ceasefire games and diplomatic games that I would argue Hamas has no advantage whatsoever of putting a of actually signing on to a ceasefire. The hope was that after Israel took out and took out Yahya Sinwar, that there would be room for more negotiations. He was holding all the cards as far as a ceasefire. They've been putting out bounties. They've been putting out feelers as far as trying to put this pressure and move this along. It is important to remind everybody to note that a ceasefire really doesn't advance any of Hamas's goals. Hamas's goal, which has been the goal from the beginning, is to survive this war and to come out victoriously, saying we survived and we're still here. If that happens, then we have failed. And so this is exactly the push and pull that we're playing out here. I think that the Egyptians at this point in the game are looking to make efforts, and there's pressure being put on the Egyptians as a result. Again, there is a lot of unknown as we head toward January 20th. There's a lot of concern of how things may change going forward. So I think that there is a desire, at least from the Egyptians, knowing there's going to be a new U.S. president, to try to create some kind of cleaner slate. But there's a lot of unknowns with this regard at large. And I think that while Hamas is basically 95% devastated at large, you still see that they are able to operate. And let's not forget that the entire oxygen of Hamas has been coming in through the tunnels on the Egyptian side. So there are many moving parts here. No doubt that the Egyptians want to come out as clean as possible in this regard. But to trust that the idea that Hamas is actually going to move this along, I'm a little skeptical of that. The more information and the more intelligence that the Israelis are gathering, that's where the pressure is coming in to try to release and save as many hostages as possible. Let's not also forget, it's also important to note that Sinwar's brother, who is now left as one of the successors of of the Hamas leadership, is as ruthless as his brother was, and he has marching orders to continue all of this, using the hostages and dead or alive, as pawns, and that's what we're seeing play out exactly now, and every day that the war goes on, and really every day that goes by. The chances, and this is a really live. These are actual risks, because every day that goes by puts the hostages that are still alive at ongoing risk.
Yeah, and speaking of unknowns, Dr. Asaf, I changed the image to show the conflicts out in Beirut, Lebanon, with Israel, also with the terroristic organization of Hezbollah. A lot of the viewers confused about what is the latest as relates to ceasefire talks. Is there a ceasefire? Is there not a ceasefire? We know just hours into the initial one that was agreed upon, we saw sides that did not honor it.
Sure, and that was to be expected. I mean, I think that the idea that the pressure that came down, let's contextualize it as well, and this is also important to note. Amos Hochstein, the Middle East envoy of the current administration, went down. This is basically their last hurrah to try to get a win. What a win, any kind of win to kind of leave a kind of a better legacy in the region that they've been part of over the past year plus, before the Trump administration enters office on January 20th. Hochstein came down to the region. They, again, this was also involved with the French. There was a lot of conversations about how this would play out, but within hours, as you said, Hezbollah decided to not honor the agreement. And so this is part of the push and pull, how much they can keep going as far as allowing this to continue further, because again, Israeli citizens are still displaced. They have not been able to go back. Hezbollah is still an ongoing threat to the Israeli lives on a day-to-day basis. And you're trusting the idea that Hezbollah, a known active terrorist organization, is actually going to abide by this very agreement. And so the pressure that came down, again, hours after Hezbollah broke the agreement, was from the administration: do not engage, or try not to engage more, or not to to escalate the situation. Again, that's an untenable situation for the Israelis. Israel already declared from the beginning of this war and the beginning of this ceasefire that should Hezbollah violate the ceasefire, they will retaliate. And they have done so. I mean, so again, I think that they're trying as much as they can to temper their responses, while at the same time, they have to maintain the war. The war is not over. The war has never been over. This was seen by the Israelis as a temporary calm, that they could assess the situation, figure out where things are, potentially, give troops, obviously, a break before this continues. But this war is far from over. And let's not forget that Hezbollah is a direct arm, like Hamas has been, a direct arm of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so Iran is also using the opportunity to rearm the area. And, and again, in the same connection, just jumping over to the next part geographically, what is currently happening in Syria is, of course, the concern is by the Israelis that Iran is going to use that opportunity to try to use a Syrian-Lebanese border to rearm Hezbollah at the same time. So all of these areas are connected, and they're all linked by the same kind of Islamist ideological narrative, even though they have different tactics, but ideologically, they are very much aligned.
I'm glad you hit on Syria, Dr. Asaf, because a lot of questions from viewers of how does this relate to the already ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. It seems like once focus is on one terroristic organization, then another group ramps up their antagonizing against Israel. Could you provide that perspective? You do a great job with it.
Sure. So just to contextualize what's happening in Syria as well. So what's currently happening in Syria, as far as the anti-Assad rebels who are attacking Syria, are actually this entire move has been allowed because Israel has devastated Hezbollah, and so you have here a bunch of forces. Some of the main forces are remnants of Al Qaeda and the remnant of the Nusra Brigade. They are attacking the Assad regime. Some of them are sponsored by Turkey. So the whole connection also between there is an alliance between Turkey, Russia, and Iran, who are trying to sustain or maintain what they can deal with when it comes to the Assad regime. On the other hand, you have other rebel forces who are coming in, again, with the sole goal of going into taking and toppling the Assad regime, given what Assad represents. Let's not forget the fact that a lot of this is remnants of going back to the Syrian civil war, and a lot of this was put in place by some of the mistakes that were made by the Obama administration. And so the forces that are coming in here are all part of this culmination of how this has become, unfortunately, the wild, wild west as a result of what's been happening in Lebanon. But this is all part of the attempt to try to take out the, Assad, and Assad forces are coming in to try to maintain the area itself. That we have seen, of course, Russian support. The Russians have supported the Assad regime. Russia has forces in the region itself, and the entire kind of crux of or the stronghold, and I would say, to contextualize it, the backbone of Syria is based on three cities: Aleppo, Homs, and Damascus. And so the further the rebels get into these areas of taking out, these areas itself and taking out the Assad regime, this is where their ideology is taking over, and they want to push Assad as far out of it. There's also been attacks on Alawites, which are minorities, but the Assad regime itself is from Alawites. We've seen attacks also on Kurdish women, images that are analogous to my mind of what we saw also on October 7th, being taken hostage. Potentially there is sexual and violence and sexual abuse taking place within those imageries. This is all part of the new chaos. They're part of these Islamist regimes that are coming together in the Islamist forces to try to topple the Assad regime. At the same time, There's also a tension which has been ongoing between the Turkish forces on the Turkish-Syrian border, which is again part of that civil war. So Turkey, Erdogan is pushing all of this as well against the Assad regime, and the Russians are trying to maintain the use to be as brokers in this larger constellation. But this is again a very fluid and a very ongoing situation as far as where these groups are coming from. And all of this is part of the concern that the Israelis have that is all going to spill into Israel while the Israelis are watching all of this, because the concern is that this will be yet another front for Israel to fight as it relates to the northern front, because of the Lebanese, how the proximity of how Lebanon and Syria are close by, and because Syria has also been playing all along with Hezbollah, and Syria too is also gets support by the Iranians. There's Shiite control, ideologically coming here financially wise. And as I said before, there is a concern that as Iran sends in more support for going in there, that they're going to try to also get support for Lebanon for the Hezbollah in Lebanon in their fight against Israel.
Dr. Asaf, we truly appreciate this thorough and detailed breakdown. Again, so many conflicts going on simultaneously, and we appreciate you breaking it down so they don't get convoluted. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you as always. I appreciate it.
Thank you.